The well was dying, and Hannah Brennan could hear it gasping like a wounded animal every time she lowered the bucket into its depths. She stood in the yard of her family's homestead on a September morning in 1878, the Kansas sun already fierce at 7 o'clock, and listened to the rope scrape against dry stone as the bucket descended. When it finally hit water, the splash was shallow, sickly. She pulled it up hand over hand, the muscles in her shoulders burning, and found barely 3 inches of cloudy water at the bottom. Her father appeared in the doorway of their small frame house, his face as weathered as the land around them. Thomas Brennan had come to Kansas 12 years ago with nothing but a wagon and a dream, and now that dream was turning to dust in his hands. The wheat crop had been poor this year, stunted by the drought, and the cattle were thin. Hannah could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, in the lines around his mouth. "How much?" he asked. "Enough for breakfast and to water the chickens," Hannah said. "Maybe one more bucket after that if we are careful." Her father nodded slowly. He was a man who said little and felt much, and Hannah had learned to read the silences between his words. This silence said that they were in trouble, the kind of trouble that could not be fixed by hard work alone. Hannah's mother, Eileen, called from inside. "Breakfast is ready." They ate in near silence, the 3 of them around the scarred wooden table that had traveled with them from Missouri. Hannah's 2 younger brothers had gone to work for a ranch up north, sending money home when they could, but it was never enough. The homestead was 160 acres of stubborn Kansas prairie, beautiful in its way but unforgiving. The drought had lasted through July and August, and now in September there was still no rain. "I had a letter from Samuel Porter yesterday," her father said finally, not looking up from his plate. Hannah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Samuel Porter was a widower, nearly 40 years old, who owned a large spread 15 miles west. He had money, cattle, and a reputation for getting what he wanted. "He is interested in joining our properties," her father continued. "His land runs adjacent to ours on the western section. He thinks together we could manage the water situation better. He has 2 wells that are still producing." "Thomas," her mother said quietly, a warning in her voice. "He is willing to invest in improvements," her father said. "New equipment, perhaps even a windmill, but he wants a partnership that is more than just land." Hannah set down her fork. She was 22 years old enough to understand exactly what her father was saying without him having to speak it plainly. Samuel Porter wanted a wife, and the Brennan homestead needed saving. It was a transaction, simple as buying cattle or trading grain. "I have not given him an answer," her father said, finally meeting her eyes. "I wanted to speak with you first." Hannah looked at her mother, who was staring at her hands folded in her lap. Eileen Brennan had been a beauty once, and there was still grace in the way she moved, but the prairie had worn her down, carved away everything soft. Hannah sometimes wondered if her mother regretted coming west, regretted the hardship and the loneliness. But Eileen never complained, never spoke of regret. That was not the way of women like her. "The county dance is tomorrow night," Hannah said finally. "Can I have until after that to think about it?" Her father considered this, then nodded. "The Porters will be there. Samuel mentioned he would like to see you." Hannah pushed back from the table and carried her plate to the wash basin. Through the window above it, she could see their land stretching to the horizon, brown and brittle. The sky was a hard, pitiless blue, empty of clouds. She had loved this place once, had loved the wildness of it, the feeling that anything was possible. Now it felt like a trap closing around her. The next day passed slowly. Hannah helped her mother with the washing, using water so carefully that each cup felt precious. They baked bread for the week, and Hannah churned butter until her arms ached. In the afternoon, She took the wagon to the Hadley place 3 miles south to trade eggs for a length of ribbon. Margaret Hadley, who was Hannah's age and newly married to a farmer, looked happy but tired, her hands already rough from work. "You are going to the dance tonight?" Margaret asked as she measured out the ribbon, a soft blue that matched Hannah's eyes. "Yes," Hannah said. "My mother insisted. Good. You need some fun. Lord knows there is little enough of it out here." Margaret tied off the ribbon and handed it over. "Is it true about Samuel Porter?" News traveled fast in the scattered community of homesteaders and ranchers. Hannah felt her face heat. "My father is considering a business arrangement." "Oh, Hannah." Margaret's expression was full of sympathy. "Samuel is not a bad man, but he is old enough to be your father." "I know," Hannah said, "but if we lose the homestead, we have nothing. My parents put everything into this land." Margaret reached across the counter and squeezed Hannah's hand. "Maybe something will happen tonight. Maybe you will meet someone else, someone better." Hannah managed a smile, but she did not believe it. The county dance was held 4 times a year, and she knew every man who would be there. Most were married, and the few single ones were either too young or too rough, cowboys passing through with no intention of settling. The idea that her life might change in a single night was the stuff of storybooks, not real life on the Kansas prairie. But she let herself hope anyway, just a little, as she drove the wagon home through the golden afternoon light. That evening, Hannah dressed carefully in her best gown, a simple cotton dress in pale green that her mother had made 2 years ago. It was faded now, mended in places, but still pretty. She threaded the new blue ribbon through her hair, which was dark and thick, falling past her shoulders. Her mother helped her fasten the small buttons at the back of the dress, her fingers gentle. "You look beautiful," Eileen said softly. "Thank you, Mama." "Hannah." Her mother turned her around, hands on her shoulders. "You do not have to do anything you do not want to do. Your father and I will find another way." But they both knew there was no other way, not really. The well was dying, the crops had failed, and the bank in town was not interested in extending more credit. Hannah had seen the ledger her father kept, had seen the numbers that did not add up. Samuel Porter's offer was a lifeline, and lifelines were not to be refused. "I know," Hannah said. "It will be all right." They drove to town in the wagon, the 3 of them, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red. The county seat was called Riverside, though the river it was named for was now little more than a trickle of mud. The dance was being held in the largest building in town, a warehouse that had been cleared out and decorated with bunting and lanterns. Music was already spilling out into the street when they arrived, fiddle and guitar and the stomp of boots on wooden floors. Inside, the warehouse was transformed. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over the crowd. There were perhaps 60 people there, families from homesteads and ranches scattered across the county, all dressed in their best clothes. The musicians sat on a makeshift stage at one end, playing a lively reel, and couples spun across the floor. Children ran between the dancers, shrieking with laughter, and old men stood along the walls, smoking and talking. Hannah's father went to join the other homesteaders, and her mother was drawn into conversation with the wives. Hannah stood near the refreshment table, watching the dancers and trying to feel some of the joy that filled the room. It was hard. She felt separate from it all, as though she were watching through a window. "Miss Brennan." She turned to find Samuel Porter standing beside her. He was a tall man, solid and stern, with gray threading through his dark hair. He wore a suit that was too fine for the occasion, too formal, and it made him look even more out of place. "Mr. Porter," she said, forcing a smile, "you look lovely tonight." His voice was flat, businesslike even in a compliment. "May I have this dance?" There was no polite way to refuse. Hannah let him lead her onto the floor, and they joined the other couples in a waltz. Samuel Porter danced correctly, mechanically, his hand on her waist firm and impersonal. He smelled of bay rum and tobacco. "Your father and I have been discussing arrangements," he said as they turned. "I hope he has spoken with you." "He has mentioned it," Hannah said carefully. "Good. I think it would be a beneficial partnership for both families. You would be well provided for, and your parents would be secure." He spoke as though discussing a cattle purchase, weighing the benefits. "I am not a young man, Miss Brennan, but I am steady. I can offer you stability." Stability. The word felt heavy, like a stone around her neck. Hannah looked past his shoulder at the other dancers, all of them laughing and spinning, and felt a sharp ache of longing for something she could not name. When the dance ended, Samuel escorted her back to the edge of the floor and excused himself to speak with her father. Hannah stood there, feeling trapped, until Margaret Hadley appeared at her elbow with a cup of punch. "You look like you need this," Margaret said. "Is it that obvious?" Hannah took the cup and drank gratefully. "Only to someone who knows you. Come outside for a minute. You need air." They slipped through the crowd and out a side door into the cool night. The noise of the dance faded behind them, and Hannah breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the smell of dust and dry grass. The stars overhead were brilliant, a river of light across the black sky. "Do you really think you will marry him?" Margaret asked. "I do not know what else to do," Hannah said. "My family needs help, and he is offering it." "But do you want to marry him?" "Want has nothing to do with it," Hannah said, and she heard the bitterness in her own voice. "Want is a luxury, Margaret. I cannot afford it." They stood in silence for a moment, and then Margaret said, "Look." Hannah followed her gaze to the edge of the building where a group of men stood talking, cowboys by the look of them, dusty from the trail. They were younger than most of the men inside, lean and weathered, and they carried themselves with the easy confidence of men who lived outside the boundaries of settled life. One of them stood slightly apart from the others, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar and a strong, clean-shaven jaw. Even in the dim light, Hannah could see that he was handsome, but it was more than that. There was something in the way he held himself, a quietness, a self-containment that drew her attention. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and their eyes met across the darkness. Hannah felt a jolt go through her, a shock like touching a live wire. His eyes were pale in the lantern light, gray or blue, and they held hers for a long moment before he looked away. "Who is that?" Hannah asked. Margaret squinted. "I do not know. Probably a drover. There was a cattle drive-through here last week, heading to Dodge City. Some of the hands might have stayed behind. A drover. A man with no ties, no land, who would move on when the work dried up." Exactly the kind of man Hannah could not afford to be interested in, but her heart was beating faster and she could not look away. "Come on," Margaret said, tugging her arm. "Let us go back inside before someone misses you." They returned to the dance, but Hannah found it hard to focus. Her eyes kept drifting to the door, wondering if the cowboy would come in. Samuel Porter asked her to dance again, and she moved through the steps automatically, her mind elsewhere. And then, halfway through the evening, the cowboys did come in. There were 5 of them, and they stood just inside the door, looking around with the careful wariness of men who were used to being unwelcome. The music faltered for a moment, and conversation stopped as people turned to look. But then the fiddler struck up a new tune, louder and faster, and the moment passed. The cowboys moved to the refreshment table, and the dance continued. Hannah watched from the edge of the floor as the tall cowboy filled a cup with punch and drank it in one swallow. He looked uncomfortable, out of place, and she felt a sudden sympathy for him. She knew what it was to feel like an outsider, to stand on the edge of something and not quite belong, Before she could think better of it, she crossed the room to where he stood. "Good evening," she said. He turned, surprised, and she saw his eyes up close for the first time. They were gray, the color of smoke, and they held a wariness that softened when he looked at her. "Evening, miss," he said. His voice was low, rough around the edges, with an accent she could not quite place. "Texas, maybe, or farther south." "I am Hannah Brennan," she said, holding out her hand. He looked at it for a moment as though unsure what to do, then took it carefully in his own. His hand was calloused, warm, and much larger than hers. "Austin Pierce," he said. "Are you here with the cattle drive?" she asked. "Was," he said. "Drive went on to Dodge without me. I hired on with a rancher up north, fellow named Dalton, starting work next week. So he was staying. That changed things just a little." Hannah felt a flutter of something in her chest, hope or excitement or maybe just recklessness. "You know how to dance, Mr. Pierce?" she asked. He looked startled, then wary. "Some," he said, "but I am not much good at it." "Neither am I," Hannah lied. "We can muddle through together." For a moment she thought he would refuse, and she could see him weighing the risk of saying yes. Then something shifted in his expression, a decision made, and he set down his cup. "All right," he said. She led him onto the floor as the musicians started a slow waltz. Austin Pierce put his hand on her waist with the tentative care of a man handling something fragile, and they began to move. He had not lied about his dancing. He was stiff, uncertain, his timing just a half beat off. But he was trying, and there was something endearing about his concentration, the way his brow furrowed as he focused on his steps. "You are doing fine," Hannah said. He glanced down at her, and a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less guarded. "You are a kind liar, Miss Brennan." She laughed, and it felt good, like releasing something that had been held too tight. "All right, you are terrible, but I do not mind." They danced in silence for a while, and Hannah became aware of the stares they were attracting. She knew what people were thinking. Samuel Porter was watching from across the room, his expression unreadable. Her father stood with a group of men near the door, frowning, but Hannah did not care. For the first time in days, weeks maybe, she felt light. The music seemed louder, sweeter, and the pressure that had been building in her chest eased when the song ended. Austin stepped back, releasing her. "Thank you," he said. "That was kind of you." "It was not kindness," Hannah said, and it was the truth. "I wanted to dance with you." He looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for something, and she held his gaze. The noise of the dance faded around them, and for a moment it was just the two of them standing in a bubble of silence. "Austin." One of the other cowboys called to him from across the room. "We are heading out." The moment broke. Austin glanced toward his friends, then back at Hannah. "I should go," he said, "but I am glad I met you, Miss Brennan." "Hannah," she said. "You can call me Hannah." "Hannah," he repeated, and her name in his rough voice sounded different, better. "I hope I will see you again." He started to turn away, and Hannah felt a sudden, desperate certainty that if she let him leave now, she would never see him again. That whatever this was, this spark of connection, it would be snuffed out by duty and practicality, and the 100 small compromises that made up her life. So she did something reckless, something completely unlike herself. She reached out and caught his arm, and when he turned back, surprised, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was quick, impulsive, just a brush of her lips against his. But she felt the shock of it go through both of them, felt him go still under her touch. His hand came up instinctively to her waist, steadying her. And for a heartbeat they stood frozen, her mouth against his, the world narrowing to the point of contact between them. Then Hannah stepped back, her heart hammering, her face hot. She could not believe what she had just done. Around them, the dance had gone quiet again, and she was aware of dozens of eyes on them, of the scandal she had just created. But Austin Pierce was staring at her with an expression of stunned wonder, and in that moment, Hannah did not regret it. "Hannah," he said again, and this time her name was a question, an answer a promise. Then his friends were pulling him toward the door, laughing and ribbing him, and he let himself be led away. But he looked back at her twice before he disappeared into the night, and Hannah stood in the middle of the dance floor, alone, her fingers pressed to her lips. Her mother appeared at her side, her face tight with worry. "Hannah, what have you done?" "I do not know," Hannah said, and it was the truth. She felt dizzy, reckless, alive in a way she had not felt in months. "I do not know, Mama, but I could not help it." Samuel Porter was standing near the refreshment table, his expression cold and closed. Hannah's father was making his way toward her through the crowd, his face dark with anger or concern, she could not tell which. The dance had resumed, but the music felt distant, unreal. Hannah did not care. She could still feel the warmth of Austin's hand on her waist, the surprise and softness of his mouth against hers. Whatever consequences came from this moment, she would face them, but she would not take it back. She could not. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Hannah's father did not speak to her until they were in the wagon, heading home under the stars. Then he said, his voice carefully controlled, "That was foolish, Hannah." "I know," she said. "Samuel Porter left early. I do not think he will renew his offer." "I know," she said again. Her father was silent for a long moment, the reins loose in his hands as the horses plodded along the rutted road. Then he sighed, a sound of weariness and frustration. "I do not know what we will do now." "I am sorry, Papa," Hannah said, and she meant it. She had not set out to ruin her family's chances, to throw away their one opportunity for salvation. But she could not bring herself to regret the kiss, even knowing what it would cost. "That cowboy," her father said. "Austin Pierce, you do not even know him." "I know," Hannah said. "But I wanted to." Her mother, sitting between them, put a hand on Hannah's knee and squeezed gently. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. Eileen Brennan understood, perhaps better than her husband, what it meant to make a choice for want instead of need. They arrived home near midnight, and Hannah climbed down from the wagon feeling exhausted and exhilarated at once. She helped her mother unhitch the horses while her father went inside, and then she stood in the yard for a moment, looking up at the stars. The kiss had been a moment of madness, a rebellion against the life that was being planned for her. But as she stood there in the cool night air, Hannah could not bring herself to regret it. Whatever happened next, she had claimed that moment for herself. She went inside and undressed in the small room she had slept in since childhood, hanging her dress carefully on a peg and folding the blue ribbon she had worn in her hair. Then she lay down on her narrow bed and closed her eyes, but sleep did not come. She kept seeing Austin Pierce's face, the surprise in his eyes when she kissed him, the way he had said her name. She did not know what she expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe the kiss would remain just that, a single bright moment in an otherwise ordinary life. But a small, stubborn part of her hoped for something more. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to the sound of hoofbeats in the yard. For a moment she thought she had dreamed it, but then she heard her father's voice, low and surprised, and the deeper rumble of a man answering. Hannah sat up, her heart suddenly racing. The window of her room faced the yard, and she could see through the thin curtain that dawn was just breaking, the sky pale gray in the east. A horse stood by the fence, and two figures were silhouetted against the growing light. She got up quickly, pulling on her dress with fumbling fingers, and slipped out of her room. Her mother was standing in the doorway of the house, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watching the yard. When Hannah appeared at her side, Eileen glanced at her and said quietly, "It is him." Hannah's breath caught. She pushed past her mother and out into the yard, her feet bare on the cold ground. Austin Pierce stood facing her father, hat in his hands. He looked like he had not slept, his clothes dusty from the road, but his back was straight and his gaze was steady. When he saw Hannah, something flickered in his expression, relief or nervousness, she could not tell. "Miss Brennan," he said, and his voice was rough with fatigue. "Hannah, I came to speak with your father." Thomas Brennan looked between them, his face unreadable. "He wants to marry you," he said to Hannah. "Rode half the night to get here and ask for your hand." Hannah stared at Austin, unable to speak. It had been less than 12 hours since the kiss, since they had met. This was insane. It was impossible. And yet here he was, standing in her yard at dawn, asking to marry her. "We only just met," she managed to say. "I know," Austin said. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as though unsure how close he was allowed to come. "I know it is fast. But I have been thinking all night, and I cannot stop thinking about you, about that kiss, about the way you looked at me." He paused, struggling with the words. "I am not good at talking, but I felt something last night, and I think you felt it too. And I thought if I did not come here, if I did not ask, I would regret it the rest of my life." Hannah's throat was tight. She looked at her father, who was watching her with an expression she had never seen before, something between concern and hope. "I have nothing to offer you," Austin said. "No land, no money, just a job working cattle and a horse. But I am a hard worker, and I would do right by you, by your family. I would do whatever it takes." "You do not know anything about me," Hannah said, but her voice was shaking. "I know enough," Austin said. "I know you are kind. I know you are brave. I know you kissed me in front of the whole town, even though it probably cost you." He was right about that. Hannah glanced at her father again, and Thomas gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not permission exactly, but acknowledgement. The choice was hers. "Can I speak with him alone?" Hannah asked. Her father hesitated, then nodded. "We will be inside." He and Eileen went back into the house, leaving Hannah and Austin standing in the yard. The sun was rising now, spilling golden light across the prairie, and somewhere a rooster crowed. It felt unreal, like something out of a dream. "Why did you really come here?" Hannah asked. Austin looked at her for a long moment. "Because when you kissed me, I felt something I have not felt in a long time, maybe ever. And I thought, if there is even a chance that you felt it too, I have to try." "You do not know me," Hannah said again. "You do not know what you would be getting into. My family is in debt. Our well is failing. The crops were bad this year. If you marry me, you will be taking on all of that." "I do not care," Austin said simply. "You should care," Hannah said, but there was no heat in it. "This is not a storybook, Austin. This is real life, and real life is hard." "I know that," he said. "I have been on my own since I was 15. I have worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, slept on the ground more nights than I can count. I know about hard, but I also know that something like what I felt last night does not come along often, maybe never. And I would rather take a chance on it than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Hannah felt tears prickling at her eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this wild, improbable thing could work. But she was also terrified. Marriage was supposed to be carefully considered, a practical arrangement between families. This was the opposite of that. This was leaping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch you. "What if it does not work?" she asked. "What if we are making a mistake?" "Then we will figure it out together," Austin said. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "I am not asking you to have all the answers right now. I am just asking you to take a chance. On me. On us." Hannah looked into his gray eyes and saw sincerity there, and hope, and something that might have been the beginning of love. She thought about Samuel Porter, about the cold calculation of his proposal. She thought about her parents, about the failing well and the dying crops. And she thought about the kiss, about the way it had felt to claim something for herself, to choose one over need. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like stepping off that cliff, like free fall. "Yes, I will marry you." Austin's face transformed. The wariness dropped away and he smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "You will." "I will," Hannah said, and suddenly she was smiling too, even as tears ran down her cheeks. "I must be out of my mind, but I will." He reached for her then, his hands cupping her face with such gentleness that it made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said, and then he kissed her, soft and careful as though she were something precious. This kiss was different from the one at the dance. That had been quick, impulsive, a spark struck in the dark. This was deliberate, a promise made and accepted. Hannah felt the warmth of it spread through her, melting the fear and uncertainty. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "I should speak with your father," Austin said. "Make it official." They went inside together, and Thomas Brennan looked up from where he sat at the table, a cup of coffee in his hands. Eileen stood by the stove, her expression cautious but not unkind. "She said yes," Austin told them, "if you will give us your blessing." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "You are taking on a lot," he said finally. "This homestead is in trouble. The well is nearly dry and we owe money to the bank in town. I will not lie to you about that." "I understand," Austin said, "and I will help however I can. I start work at the Dalton Ranch next week, and I will give you whatever I can spare from my wages." "That is generous," Thomas said, but there was doubt in his voice. "But wages will not be enough. Not to dig a new well, not to get us through the winter." "Then I will dig the well myself," Austin said, and Hannah heard the determination in his voice. "I will do whatever needs to be done." Thomas looked at Hannah and she saw the question in his eyes. "Are you sure about this?" She nodded and her father sighed. "All right," he said. "You have my blessing, but we do this properly. You will marry in the church in Riverside with the minister officiating, and until then you will not be alone with my daughter unchaperoned." "Of course, sir," Austin said. "Thank you." They shook hands, and Hannah felt a rush of relief and joy so strong it made her dizzy. It was happening. She was going to marry Austin Pierce, a man she had met less than a day ago, and somehow it felt right in a way that nothing else in her life had felt for a long time. The wedding was arranged for the following Sunday, a week away. It was fast, almost scandalously fast, but no one protested. Hannah suspected that her mother was secretly pleased, that Eileen saw in Austin something that she approved of, some quality that made him worthy of her daughter. Her father was more reserved, but he did not stand in the way. The week passed in a strange blur of normalcy and anticipation. Austin came by the homestead every evening after working at the Dalton Ranch, often staying for dinner. He was a quiet man, not given to long conversations, but Hannah began to learn the rhythms of his silences. There was a thoughtfulness to him, a steadiness, that she found comforting. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words were careful, considered. On the third evening, after dinner, he asked to see the well. Hannah walked him out to the yard, where the well stood in the growing dusk. Austin leaned over the edge, looking down into the darkness, then dropped a stone and listened to it hit the bottom with a hollow splash. "How deep is it?" he asked. "About 30 feet, Thomas said, coming up behind them. "We dug it when we first arrived, and it was good for 10 years, but the water table has dropped." Austin was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "I could dig deeper, or we could try a new location farther from the house. There is usually water if you go deep enough." "That is a lot of work," Thomas said. "Back-breaking work." "I do not mind," Austin said simply. "I told you I would help." And so the next Saturday, 2 days before the wedding, Austin arrived at dawn with a pickaxe and shovel. He had chosen a spot about 50 yards from the house, in a low depression where the ground stayed greener. Thomas was skeptical, but he did not argue. Hannah brought Austin water throughout the day, watching as he swung the pickaxe with steady, rhythmic strokes, breaking through the hard, packed earth. His shirt was soaked with sweat within an hour, and he stripped it off, working in just his undershirt. Hannah tried not to stare at the play of muscles across his back, the strength in his arms, but it was hard to look away. "You should rest," she said when the sun was high overhead. "I am all right," Austin said, but he accepted the water she offered and drank deeply. "I want to make good progress before the wedding." "Why?" Hannah asked. "We have time." Austin set down the cup and looked at her. "Because your father does not trust me yet," he said. "And I do not blame him. I am a stranger who showed up out of nowhere and asked to marry his daughter. But I can show him that I mean what I say, that I am serious about this." "You do not have to prove anything," Hannah said. "Yes, I do," Austin said. He picked up the pickaxe again. "Not just to him. To you, too. You took a chance on me, Hannah. I want you to know it was not a mistake." He went back to digging, and Hannah stood there for a moment, watching him, feeling something warm and sure settle in her chest. This man, this quiet, determined man, was going to be her husband, and maybe, just maybe, it was going to be all right. The wedding was held on Sunday at noon in the small church in Riverside. It was a simple affair, with only a handful of people in attendance. Margaret Hadley was there, beaming, and a few of the neighboring families. Austin's friends from the cattle drive had moved on, so he stood at the altar alone, waiting in a borrowed suit that was a little too tight across the shoulders. Hannah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slimmer frame. It was ivory silk, yellowed with age but still beautiful, and her mother had woven wildflowers into her hair. When Hannah walked down the short aisle on her father's arm, she saw Austin's face change, saw the awe and tenderness in his eyes, and she felt beautiful. The minister was an old man, half blind and prone to rambling, but he got through the ceremony without too much trouble. When he asked if Austin would take Hannah to be his wife, Austin said, "I will," in a voice that was steady and sure. And when it was Hannah's turn, she looked into Austin's gray eyes and said, "I will," and meant it with her whole heart. They were pronounced husband and wife, and Austin kissed her in front of the small congregation. It was chaste, appropriate, but Hannah felt the promise in it, the beginning of something new. Afterward, there was a small meal at the homestead, roast chicken and potatoes and pie made from the last of the summer berries. Austin sat beside Hannah at the table, his hand resting on hers, and she felt the solid warmth of him, the reality of what they had just done settling over her. As the sun began to set, the guests left, and Hannah's parents retreated into the house, giving the newlyweds privacy. Hannah and Austin stood together in the yard, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. "Are you scared?" Austin asked. "A little," Hannah admitted. "Are you terrified?" he said, and she laughed, surprised. He smiled down at her. "But it is a good kind of scared. The kind that means something important is happening." They had planned to spend their wedding night in the barn, which her father had cleaned out and furnished with a bed and a few pieces of simple furniture. It was not much, but it was private, and it was theirs. Austin carried Hannah over the threshold, which made her laugh, and then they stood awkwardly in the small space, suddenly unsure. They were married now, husband and wife, but they were still strangers in so many ways. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," Austin said quietly. "I can sleep on the floor if you want." Hannah looked at him, at this man who had ridden through the night to ask for her hand, who had dug a well with his bare hands to prove his commitment, who was offering to sleep on the floor on their wedding night to make her comfortable. And she felt a rush of affection so strong it almost knocked her over. "I do not want you to sleep on the floor," she said. "I want you to stay with me." Austin's expression softened. He reached for her slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he drew her close. "I will take care of you," he said against her hair. "I promise." And Hannah believed him. That night, in the quiet darkness of the barn, they came together as husband and wife. It was tentative at first, both of them learning the shape and rhythm of each other, but there was tenderness in it, and care. Austin was patient, gentle, and when Hannah gasped against his shoulder, it was as much from surprise at the intimacy as from anything else. Afterward they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Austin's arm around her waist, and Hannah felt a bone-deep contentment she had not known she was capable of. "Thank you," Austin murmured, half asleep. "For what?" Hannah asked. "For saying yes," he said. "For taking a chance on me." Hannah turned in his arms to face him. In the moonlight filtering through the cracks in the barn walls, she could just make out his features, the strong line of his jaw, the softness in his eyes. "Thank you for asking," she said. He kissed her forehead, and they drifted off to sleep together, the first of many nights. The next morning, Austin was up at dawn, back to digging the well. Hannah brought him breakfast and coffee, and they ate together sitting on the edge of the hole he was excavating. It was already 6 feet deep, the walls shored up with timber to keep them from collapsing. "How deep do you think you will have to go?" Hannah asked. "Hard to say," Austin said. "Could be 20 feet, could be 50, but I will find water, I promise." He worked every spare moment before and after his shifts at the Dalton Ranch. Hannah worried that he was pushing himself too hard, but whenever she suggested he rest, he just shook his head and kept going. Her father helped when he could, and together they made steady progress. 2 weeks after the wedding, the well was 30 feet deep and still dry. Austin climbed out at the end of the day covered in dust and grime, his hands blistered despite the gloves he wore. Hannah had water waiting for him, and he washed up at the pump, scrubbing the worst of the dirt off his face and arms. "Nothing yet," he said, and she heard the frustration in his voice. "You will find it," Hannah said. "I know you will." He gave her a tired smile. "I hope you are right." That night in the barn, Hannah tended to his blistered hands, wrapping them in clean cloth soaked in salve her mother had made. Austin winced but did not complain, and when she was done, he pulled her into his lap. "I am sorry this is taking so long," he said. "You have nothing to be sorry for," Hannah said. "You are doing more than anyone could ask." "I want to give you a good life," Austin said. "I want your family to be secure. I know I came into this with nothing, but I want to build something for us." Hannah cupped his face in her hands. "You have already given me more than you know," she said. "I was drowning, Austin. My whole life I felt like I was drowning, and you pulled me out. That is enough." He kissed her then, deep and searching, and Hannah felt the desperation in it, the need to be believed. She kissed him back with everything she had, trying to show him what words could not convey. They made love that night with a new urgency, a new understanding. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Austin said quietly, "I love you, Hannah." It was the first time he had said it, and Hannah felt her breath catch. She had been waiting for those words, hoping for them, but hearing them out loud was different. It made it real. "I love you too," she said, and it was the truth. The next day, Austin went back to digging. He was down 45 feet now, so deep that he needed a rope to climb in and out. The air at the bottom was thin and stale, and Hannah worried every time he descended into the darkness. But he kept going, driven by a stubbornness that she was beginning to recognize as one of his defining traits. And then, on a hot afternoon in early October, he hit water. Hannah heard his shout from the house, and she ran out to find him climbing out of the well, soaked to the waist and grinning. "Water," he said, breathless. "Hannah, there is water." Thomas came running from the barn, and together they hauled up a bucket. It came up full, the water clear and cold, and Thomas laughed, a sound of pure relief. "You did it," he said, clapping Austin on the shoulder. "By God, you actually did it." Austin looked at Hannah, and the pride and joy in his face made her want to cry. "We did it," he said. That night, they celebrated with a proper meal, roast beef and potatoes and fresh bread, and Thomas opened a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. They toasted the new well and to Austin and to the future. "You have proven yourself, son," Thomas said, and Austin looked up, surprised by the word. "You have done more in a month than I could have asked. I am glad Hannah married you." It was high praise from a man who did not give it easily, and Austin looked humbled. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." As autumn settled over the prairie, life took on a new rhythm. The new well provided enough water for the household and the livestock, and with Austin's wages from the Dalton Ranch supplementing their income, the Brennan homestead began to stabilize. Hannah and Austin settled into married life, learning each other's habits and quirks. He was a man of few words, but Hannah learned to read the small signs of his affection. The way he touched her hand when he passed her in the yard, the way he listened intently when she spoke, the way he always made sure she was warm at night. In return, Hannah learned to care for him in the ways he needed. She made sure he had a hot meal waiting when he came home from the ranch, and she tended to the small injuries that came from his work. She learned that he liked his coffee strong and his eggs scrambled, and that he slept best when she curled against his side. It was not perfect. There were moments of friction, times when Hannah's talkativeness ran up against Austin's silence, or when Austin's stubbornness clashed with Hannah's need to plan everything. But they worked through it, learning to compromise, learning to speak each other's language. One evening in late October, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Austin said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Hannah asked. "About the future," he said. "Your father's homestead is stable now, but it is not mine, not ours. I want to build something for us, our own place." Hannah looked at him, surprised. "Where would we go?" "Not far," Austin said. "There is land available just south of here along the river. It has been surveyed and opened for homesteading. I could file a claim and we could start building." "That is a lot of work," Hannah said. "Building a house, breaking the land." "I know," Austin said, "but I want it. I want us to have something that is ours, that we built together." Hannah thought about it, turning the idea over in her mind. She had lived her whole life on her parents' homestead, and the thought of leaving was both frightening and exhilarating. But she trusted Austin, trusted his vision for their future. "All right," she said, "let us do it." They filed the claim the next week, 160 acres of rolling grassland along the river. It was beautiful land, wild and open, with a view that stretched for miles. They spent Sundays walking the property, planning where they would build the house, where they would put the barn, where they would plant crops. "We will need help," Austin said. "I can do a lot of the work myself, but building a house is too much for one man." "We will ask for help," Hannah said. "The neighbors will pitch in. That is what people do out here." She was right. When word spread that Austin and Hannah were building a homestead, offers of help came from all directions. The Hadleys sent over extra timber from their land, and other neighbors volunteered to help with the raising. It was the way of the prairie, where survival depended on community. But before they could begin building, winter arrived early and hard. The first snow came in November, and by December the prairie was blanketed in white. Work on the homestead ground to a halt, and Austin and Hannah settled in for the long, cold months ahead. It was during that winter, cooped up in the barn while wind howled outside, that Hannah learned the depths of Austin's character. He did not talk much about his past, but slowly in the long dark evenings, pieces of his story emerged. He had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 5 children. His mother had died when he was 8 and his father had taken to drinking. By the time Austin was 15, home had become unbearable and he had run away to join a cattle drive. He had been on his own ever since, moving from job to job, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. "Why did you stay here?" Hannah asked. "In Kansas, I mean." "You could have kept moving." Austin looked at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Because of you," he said simply. "You made me want to stay." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm glad you did." "So am I," Austin said. He pulled her close, and they sat together in the warmth of the fire, the world outside cold and howling. But the winter brought challenges beyond the cold. In January, Hannah fell ill with a fever. It started as a cough, nothing serious, but within days she was burning up, barely able to get out of bed. Austin was frantic with worry. He rode into town through a blizzard to fetch the doctor, a gruff old man named Pritchard who examined Hannah and diagnosed pneumonia. "Keep her warm and hydrated," the doctor said, "and pray. That is all you can do." Austin did more than that. He moved Hannah into the main house where it was warmer and he barely left her side. He bathed her forehead with cool cloths when the fever spiked, and he held her when she shook with chills. He made broth and coaxed her to drink it, and he sat with her through the long, dark nights, terrified that he would wake up and she would be gone. Hannah was barely aware of most of it. The fever made everything hazy, dreamlike. But she was aware of Austin's presence, the solid warmth of him, the rough gentleness of his hands. She heard his voice, low and urgent, talking to her, telling her to fight, to come back to him. And once, in the depths of the fever, she heard him crying, the sound ragged and broken, and she wanted to reach for him, to tell him she was all right. But she could not move. It took 2 weeks for the fever to break. Hannah woke one morning to find the room bright with sunlight, and Austin asleep in a chair beside the bed, his head on his arms. He looked exhausted, his face gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. Hannah reached out and touched his hair, and he woke instantly, his eyes wide with fear and hope. "Hannah," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "You are awake." "I am," she said, and her own voice was barely a whisper. "How long was I sick?" 2 weeks, Austin said. He took her hand, holding it as though it were the most precious thing in the world. "I thought I was going to lose you." "I am sorry," Hannah said. "I did not mean to scare you." Austin made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You scared me more than anything in my life," he said. "I do not know what I would have done if," he broke off, unable to finish the sentence. Hannah squeezed his hand. "I am here," she said. "I am all right." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, and she felt the tremble in him, the release of fear and tension. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much, Hannah. I do not say it enough, but I do." "I love you too," Hannah said, "and I am not going anywhere." It took another week for Hannah to regain her strength, and Austin hovered over her the entire time, making sure she ate, making sure she rested. Her mother teased him gently about being overprotective, but Hannah did not mind. She could see the fear still lingering in his eyes, the shadow of how close he had come to losing her. When she was finally strong enough to walk outside, Austin bundled her up in blankets and carried her to the porch. The world was white and clean, the snow glittering in the sunlight, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. But it was beautiful, and Hannah felt a rush of gratitude just to be alive, to be here with him. "Thank you," she said, "for taking care of me." Austin looked at her, and the emotion in his eyes was raw, unguarded. "You are my whole world, Hannah," he said. "I would do anything for you." She kissed him then, there on the porch in the cold, bright morning, and she felt the truth of his words in the way he held her, in the way he kissed her back. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought with it a sense of renewal. The snow melted, the prairie turned green, and work on the new homestead began in earnest. Neighbors gathered for a barn raising in April, and by the end of the day, the frame of the house was standing, raw and new against the sky. Austin worked like a man possessed, determined to have the house finished before the next winter. He cut timber and hauled stone, built walls and laid floors. Hannah helped where she could, cooking for the workers, holding boards steady while Austin hammered, painting the walls inside. By late summer, the house was finished. It was a simple structure, 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs, built with their own hands. They moved in on a warm evening in August, carrying their few belongings across the threshold. That night they lay together in their new bed in their new house and listened to the sounds of the prairie outside. "We did it," Hannah said. "We built this." "We did," Austin agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have never had a home before, not a real one, not since I was a boy." Hannah turned to look at him. "This is your home now," she said, "our home." Austin smiled, and it was the soft, open smile he saved just for her. "I know," he said, "and I am grateful for it every day. The first year on the new homestead was hard. They planted wheat and corn, and the crops were decent but not spectacular. Money was tight, and there were days when Hannah wondered if they would make it. But Austin never wavered. He worked from dawn to dusk, and Hannah worked beside him, and slowly, steadily, they built a life. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She had been feeling tired and queasy for weeks, and when she finally confided in her mother, Eileen smiled knowingly and said, "You are going to have a baby." Hannah told Austin that evening after dinner as they sat together on the porch. She was nervous, unsure how he would react, but when she said the words, "I am pregnant," his face lit up with a joy so pure it took her breath away. "A baby," he said, and his voice cracked. "Hannah, that is wonderful." He pulled her into his arms and held her close, and Hannah felt the happiness radiating off him. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I am more than happy," Austin said. I do not even have words for it. A baby, our baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Hannah was sick for the first few months, and as she grew larger, the work on the homestead became harder. But Austin was attentive, protective to the point of being overbearing. He insisted she rest, that she not lift anything heavy, and he took on extra work to make up for what she could not do. Their son was born in January 1880, in the middle of a snowstorm. The labor was long and difficult, and Hannah screamed until her voice was raw. Her mother and the midwife attended her, while Austin paced outside the bedroom, unable to sit still. When the baby finally came, squalling and red-faced, the midwife brought him out to meet his father. Austin held his son for the first time with shaking hands, his face filled with awe. "He is perfect," he said. "Hannah, he is perfect." They named him Henry after Austin's father before the drinking, before the darkness. Henry Brennan Pierce, a new beginning. The baby transformed their lives. Hannah had never known such exhaustion, such all-consuming love. Henry was demanding, crying at all hours, but when he looked up at her with his gray eyes, Austin's eyes, her heart melted. And Austin was a devoted father from the start. He sang to the baby in his rough, off-key voice, and he walked him around the house when he was fussy. And he looked at his son with such tenderness that Hannah sometimes had to look away, overwhelmed by the depth of his love. Over the next few years, their family grew. Their daughter, Hattie, was born in 1882, a quiet, serious baby who looked just like Hannah. Then came Grace in 1884, cheerful and loud, and Isaac in 1886, who seemed determined to never sleep. With each child, their homestead expanded. Austin built additions onto the house, more rooms to accommodate their growing family, and the land prospered under their care. The wheat crops were good, the cattle herd grew, and slowly they paid off their debts and began to build something solid, something lasting. But it was not just work and children. There were moments of joy, of laughter, of simple happiness. Summers when the children ran wild through the fields, catching grasshoppers and climbing trees. Winters huddled around the fire, Austin telling stories while Hannah knit socks. Evenings on the porch after the children were in bed, Hannah and Austin sitting together in companionable silence, watching the sun set over their land. And there were moments when the love between them felt almost overwhelming. Austin was not a man of grand gestures or flowery words, but he showed his love in 1,000 small ways. The way he brought her coffee in the morning, made just the way she liked it. The way he fixed things around the house before she even noticed they were broken. The way he looked at her across the dinner table, surrounded by their noisy, chaotic children, and smiled as though she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And Hannah loved him with a fierceness that sometimes scared her. She loved his steadiness, his quiet strength, the way he never complained even when things were hard. She loved the way he was with their children, patient and kind, teaching them to ride and to work the land. She loved the way he still kissed her every morning before he went out to work, and every night before they went to sleep, as though it were the most important thing in the world. One evening in the spring of 1890, after the children were in bed, Austin asked Hannah to take a walk with him. They left the house and walked out across the prairie, the grass green and lush, the air sweet with the smell of wildflowers. They walked hand in hand, in the comfortable silence of people who had been together for years, until they reached the top of a low hill that overlooked their land. "I have been thinking," Austin said, breaking the silence. "About what?" Hannah asked. "About the night we met," he said. "At the county dance, do you remember?" "Of course I remember," Hannah said. "How could I forget? I kissed you in front of the whole town." Austin smiled. "You did. And then I rode home and came back the next morning to ask for your hand." "It was insane," Hannah said. "We barely knew each other." "I know," Austin said, "but it was also the best decision I ever made, marrying you, building this life with you." Hannah looked at him, at the man he had become over the past 12 years. There were gray streaks in his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. But he was still handsome, still strong, and she loved him more now than she had on that wild, impulsive night when she kissed him. "I was so scared," Hannah admitted. "I did not know if it would work, if we would work." "I was scared too," Austin said, "but I am not scared anymore. I know now that we can get through anything as long as we are together." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I do not say this enough, Hannah, but I love you. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stay in one place. You gave me everything." Hannah felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You gave me everything too," she said. "You gave me a choice, Austin. You let me choose you, choose this life, instead of having it chosen for me. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Austin pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and they stood there on the hill as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Hannah could hear the distant sounds of their children laughing inside the house, could see the lights glowing in the windows. It was a good life, a full life, the life she had chosen on that wild, reckless night when she kissed a cowboy at a county dance. "You ever regret it?" Austin asked quietly. Saying yes to me that morning, Hannah pulled back to look at him. Not for a single moment, she said. Not ever. And she meant it with her whole heart. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. In 1891, their son Reuben was born, a sturdy, determined baby who seemed to want to do everything his older siblings did. Austin was 42 by then, Hannah 34, and they marveled at how full their lives had become. The homestead thrived. The wheat crops were consistently good, and Austin had built a reputation as a fair, hard-working man. Other homesteaders came to him for advice, and he was always willing to help. Hannah ran the household with quiet efficiency, raising their children and managing the endless tasks that kept a farm running. But it was not just about work. They made time for joy, for celebrations. Every year on their wedding anniversary, Austin took Hannah into town for dinner, just the two of them. It became a tradition, a chance to remember who they were as husband and wife, not just as parents and farmers. And every year, without fail, Austin would take her hand across the table and say, "Thank you for saying yes." And Hannah would smile and say, "Thank you for asking." The children grew. Henry became a serious, thoughtful boy who loved reading and numbers. Hattie was quiet and artistic, always drawing pictures of the prairie and the animals. Grace was the wild one, fearless and loud, climbing trees and getting into trouble. Isaac was gentle, kind-hearted, always bringing home injured animals to nurse back to health. And Reuben was determined, stubborn, a miniature version of his father. Austin taught them all to ride, to work the land, to value hard work and honesty. Hannah taught them to read, to cook, to care for one another. Together, they raised their children to be kind, capable people, and they were proud of the family they had built. In 1893, Hannah's father passed away. It was not unexpected. Thomas Brennan had been ill for months, but it was still a blow. Hannah grieved deeply, and Austin held her through it, letting her cry on his shoulder, never trying to fix it, just being there. After the funeral, Hannah's mother decided to sell the old homestead and move in with them. It made sense. Eileen was getting older, and she could not manage the place on her own. They built another room onto the house, and Eileen settled in, helping with the children and the household. Having her mother there was a comfort to Hannah, especially as the children grew older and more independent. Eileen told stories of the old days, of coming west with Thomas, of building the homestead from nothing. And she watched her grandchildren with pride, marveling at how much the family had grown. One evening as they sat together shelling peas on the porch, Eileen said, "You chose well, Hannah. Austin is a good man." "I know," Hannah said. "I was lucky." "It was not just luck," her mother said. "You were brave. You took a chance on something uncertain and it paid off. Not everyone would have done that." Hannah thought about that night at the dance, about the kiss, about the wild, reckless decision to say yes when Austin showed up the next morning. It had been terrifying and uncertain and completely unlike her, but it had also been the best decision of her life. "I am glad I did," Hannah said. "I cannot imagine my life any other way." In 1895, their sixth child, Caleb, was born. He was a surprise. Hannah and Austin had thought they were done having children, but he was a welcome one. Caleb was a happy baby, always smiling, and his older siblings doted on him. But the pregnancy and birth had been hard on Hannah, harder than the others, and afterward she was tired in a way she had not been before. Austin noticed, and he insisted she rest more, take on less. He hired a woman from town to help with the heavy chores, and he made sure Hannah was not overworking herself. "I am not an invalid," Hannah protested. "I know," Austin said, "but you have given me 6 children and worked this land for 17 years. Let me take care of you for once." So Hannah rested, and slowly her strength returned. But she was aware, in a way she had not been before, that they were getting older. Austin was nearly 50 now, his hair more gray than dark, his body showing the wear of years of hard labor. And Hannah was 38, no longer the young woman who had kissed a cowboy at a dance. But they were still in love. If anything, the love had deepened over the years, grown stronger with every challenge they faced together. They knew each other completely now, knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, fears and dreams. They had built a life together, raised a family together, and the bond between them was unbreakable. In 1897, their youngest child, Miriam, was born. She was small and delicate, with Hannah's dark hair and Austin's gray eyes, and she was the baby of the family, spoiled by everyone. Her birth felt like a benediction, a completion of the family they had built. As Miriam grew, Hannah began to think about the future, about what would happen when the children were grown and gone. Henry was nearly 18 now, talking about going to college back east. Hattie was 15, already showing an interest in teaching. The younger children would follow eventually, building their own lives, their own families. And then it would be just her and Austin again, the way it had been at the beginning. The thought was both frightening and comforting. Hannah loved her children fiercely, but she also looked forward to having time alone with Austin again, to rediscovering the quiet intimacy of being just the two of them. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, the same porch where they had sat so many times before, Hannah said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" "What do you mean?" Austin asked. "If I had not kissed you that night," Hannah said. "If you had not come the next morning to ask for my hand, what would have happened?" Austin was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I do not know," he said finally. "I might have kept moving, kept working cattle drives, never settled anywhere." "And I probably would have married Samuel Porter," Hannah said, "and been miserable." Austin reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am glad you kissed me," he said. "I am glad I was brave enough to come ask for you." "So am I," Hannah said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. "I love our life," Austin said quietly. "I love our children. I love this land. But most of all, I love you. You are the reason for all of it." Hannah felt tears sting her eyes. After all these years, Austin still had the power to move her, to make her feel cherished and loved. "I love you too," she said. "So much." They sat there until the stars came out, just the two of them, and Hannah felt a deep, abiding contentment. Their life had not been easy. There had been droughts and sickness, hard winters and failed crops. But they had faced it all together, and they had built something beautiful. Over the next few years, their children began to leave home. Henry went east to study engineering, sending letters home full of excitement about the modern world. Hattie became a teacher in Riverside, boarding with a family during the week and coming home on weekends. Grace married a young rancher from the next county, and they moved north to start their own homestead. Each departure was bittersweet. Hannah was proud of her children, proud of the lives they were building, but she missed them terribly. The house felt too quiet without their noise and chaos. But Austin was there, steady and constant. And as the children left, Hannah and Austin rediscovered each other. They took long walks in the evenings, talked about things beyond the daily tasks of running a farm. They laughed more, touched more, rediscovered the passion that had first drawn them together. One night, after a particularly lovely evening, Hannah said, "I am glad it is just us again." Austin looked surprised. "Are you?" "Yes," Hannah said. "I love our children, but I love you too. And I miss this, just being with you." Austin smiled, and it was that soft, private smile he saved just for her. "I missed it too," he said, "but we have it back now." And they did. They had years ahead of them still. Years to enjoy the fruits of their labor, to watch their grandchildren grow, to sit on the porch and watch the sunset over the land they had built together. In 1905, when Hannah was 48 and Austin 60, they celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. Their children came home for the occasion, along with their spouses and children. The house was full again, overflowing with noise and laughter, and Hannah looked around at the family they had created and felt a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Austin took Hannah out to the porch. It was a warm summer night, the air sweet with the smell of hay and wildflowers. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the prairie stretched out in all directions, peaceful and still. "I have been thinking about that night," Austin said. "The night we met." "So have I," Hannah said. "I cannot believe it has been 27 years. "I was so young," Austin said, "so foolish. I did not know anything about being a husband or a father, but I knew I wanted you." "And I wanted you," Hannah said. "Even though I barely knew you, it was the craziest thing I have ever done." "And the best?" Austin asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. "And the best," Hannah confirmed. She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "You gave me a beautiful life, Austin. You gave me love and children and a home. I am so grateful." "I am the one who should be grateful," Austin said. "You took a chance on me, a nobody cowboy with nothing to offer, and you built this life with me. Everything good in my life I owe to you." Hannah felt tears spill down her cheeks. "We built it together," she said. Austin pulled her close, and they stood there under the stars, holding each other, and Hannah felt the weight of all those years, all those choices, all that love. It had not been easy, but it had been worth it. Every moment, every struggle, every joy. "I love you, Hannah Pierce," Austin said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you from the moment you kissed me at that dance, and I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you," Hannah said. "Always." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, and Hannah thought about that girl she had been, 27 years ago, desperate and scared and ready to grab at any chance for something different. She had kissed a cowboy on a wild impulse, and he had ridden home that night and come back at dawn to ask for her hand. And from that one crazy, beautiful moment, they had built a life, a good life, a full life, a life worth living. And as they stood there under the stars, surrounded by the land they had worked and the family they had raised, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that she would do it all again in a heartbeat. That kiss, that yes, that leap into the unknown, it had been the beginning of everything. Their story was not a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real and messy and hard and beautiful. It was a love story built on trust and work and stubbornness and grace, and it was theirs. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges. They would grow old together, watch their children build their own lives, welcome grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They would face illness and loss, the inevitable wear of time, but they would face it together, hand in hand, the cowboy and the girl who kissed him at a county dance. And that would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. As summer turned to fall and then to winter, Austin and Hannah settled into the rhythm of their later years. The homestead was well established now, productive and profitable. They had hired hands to help with the heavy work, young men from town who reminded Austin of himself at that age, hungry and hardworking. The children came to visit regularly, bringing their own children. Henry, now a successful engineer in Chicago, came home twice a year with his wife and 3 sons. Hattie, still teaching in Riverside, came every Sunday for dinner. Grace and her rancher husband brought their 4 children over for holidays. Isaac, who had become a veterinarian, lived just 10 miles away and stopped by often. Reuben had taken over much of the day-to-day running of the homestead, working alongside his father. And Caleb and Miriam, the youngest, were still at home, though Caleb was making noises about going to study agriculture at the state university. The house was never quiet for long. Grandchildren ran through the rooms, played in the barn, helped with the chores. And Austin and Hannah watched it all with pride and contentment, knowing that the legacy they had built would continue long after they were gone. One evening in late autumn, after a particularly boisterous family dinner, Austin and Hannah escaped to the porch. The air was cool, crisp with the promise of winter, and the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "It never gets old," Hannah said. "What does not?" Austin asked. "This," Hannah said, gesturing to the house behind them, full of noise and light and laughter. "The family, all of this. It still amazes me sometimes." Austin put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "We did good," he said simply. "We did," Hannah agreed. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. After all these years, he still made her feel safe, cherished, loved. "You remember what you said to me that morning?" Hannah asked. "When you came to ask for my hand," Austin thought for a moment. "I said a lot of things." "You said you had nothing to offer but a job and a horse," Hannah said. "But that you would do right by me, by my family, that you would do whatever it took." "I remember," Austin said quietly. "You kept that promise," Hannah said. "You gave me everything, Austin, more than I ever dreamed of." Austin was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You know, that morning I rode over here, I was terrified. I barely knew you, and I was asking you to bet your whole life on me. I kept thinking, what if she says no? What if I am making a fool of myself?" But I could not come. That kiss, it felt like a door opening, like a chance at something I never thought I could have. "A home," Hannah said softly. "A home," Austin agreed. "A family, someone who chose me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. You gave me that, Hannah. You changed everything." Hannah turned in his arms to face him. His face was lined now, weathered by sun and wind and time, but his eyes were the same gray eyes that had looked at her with such wonder on that dance floor all those years ago. "We changed everything together," she said. Austin cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, sweet and familiar, full of all the years they had shared. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Hannah Brennan Pierce," he said. "I have loved you every day since that dance, and I will love you every day until there are no more days left." "And I love you," Hannah said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "My cowboy, my husband, my love." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms as the stars came out one by one, and the prairie settled into its nightly quiet. Inside, their children and grandchildren laughed and talked, the sound of family filling the house they had built together. It was a perfect moment, a culmination of all the moments that had come before the kiss at the dance, the dawn proposal, the wedding, the well, the children, the struggles and triumphs and ordinary days that had woven together to create their life. And as they stood there, Hannah thought about that girl she had been, standing in the warehouse with a cup of punch, feeling trapped and desperate. She thought about the impulse that had made her cross the room, the recklessness that had made her kiss a stranger. And she thought about Austin, young and uncertain, who had ridden through the night because he believed in that one moment of connection. They had taken a chance on each other, a wild, improbable chance. And it had turned into this, a life, a family, a love that had lasted decades and would last beyond them in the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. "Thank you," Hannah whispered. "For what?" Austin asked. "For coming that morning," Hannah said. "For asking for my hand. For giving me this life." Austin smiled, that soft, private smile that still made her heart skip. "Thank you for saying yes," he said. "Thank you for that kiss." And there on the porch, under the vast Kansas sky, the cowboy and his bride held each other close and watched the stars come out, knowing that their story, the one that had started with a single impulsive kiss at a county dance, was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living. It was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply earned, and it was perfect. The moon rose over the prairie, casting silver light across the land they had claimed and tamed and loved. And Austin and Hannah Pierce stood together, still in love after all these years, grateful for every moment, every choice, every kiss that had brought them to this place. Their children would tell their grandchildren about them someday, about the girl who kissed a cowboy at a dance, and the cowboy who rode home that night and came back at dawn to ask for her hand. They would tell the story of the love that grew from that one wild moment, the family that sprang from that single brave choice. And those grandchildren would tell their own children, and the story would live on, a testament to the power of taking chances, of choosing love over safety, of believing that sometimes the craziest decisions are the ones that change everything. But for now, in this moment, it was just Austin and Hannah, standing together on the porch of the house they had built, surrounded by the life they had created, holding each other under the stars. And it was enough. It was everything. It was home. The next morning, Hannah woke to find Austin already dressed, standing at the window looking out over their land. The first light of dawn was painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and she could see the silhouette of the barn, the fences stretching into the distance, the cattle grazing in the far pasture. "You are up early," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. Austin turned and she saw something in his face, a pensiveness that made her sit up. "I was thinking," he said. "About what?" He came and sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. "About how much this place has grown, how much we have built. And I was thinking that maybe it is time to make it official." "Official how?" Hannah asked. "I want to deed part of the land to the children," Austin said. "Not all of it, not yet, but Henry could use some land for an investment. And Grace and her husband could expand their ranch if they had more acreage. And Reuben, he has been working this place as hard as I have. He should have a stake in it." Hannah considered this. It made sense. Their children were grown now, building their own lives, and they deserved to benefit from what she and Austin had created. But it also felt like a shift, an acknowledgement that they were entering a new phase of life. "What about you?" she asked. "What about us?" "We keep the main homestead," Austin said. "The house and the land immediately around it. That stays ours as long as we are alive, and then it goes to all the children equally. But the outlying parcels, we can start dividing those now, while we are still here to see our children use them." Hannah nodded slowly. "I think that is a good idea," she said, "but we should talk to them all together, make sure everyone understands and agrees." "We will," Austin said. He squeezed her hand. "I just want to make sure everything is settled, Hannah. I want to know that when we are gone, the children will not fight over what we leave behind. I want them to have clear boundaries, clear ownership." "You are thinking about dying," Hannah said, and there was a tremor in her voice. "I am thinking about being prepared," Austin said gently. "We are not young anymore, Hannah. I am 60 years old and you are 48. We have good years left, God willing, but we need to think about the future." Hannah knew he was right, but the thought of their mortality, of an end to this life they had built, made her chest tighten. I am not ready to let go, she said. Neither am I, Austin said. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. But we will face it the same way we have faced everything else, together. They called a family meeting the following Sunday when all the children could come home. The house was full again, with Henry and his wife arriving from Chicago, Grace and her family coming in from their ranch, and all the others gathering around the big table Austin had built years ago, expanded now with extra boards to accommodate everyone. Austin stood at the head of the table, and Hannah sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee under the table. He cleared his throat, and the room fell quiet. "Your mother and I have been talking," Austin began, "and we have decided it is time to start making plans for the future of this homestead." He explained what they wanted to do, how they wanted to divide the land, and the children listened intently. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Henry spoke. "That is very generous, Papa," he said. "But are you sure? You and Mama could live another 30 years. You might want to keep all the land for yourselves." "We have more than enough," Austin said. "And we want to see you all benefit from it while we are still alive. We want to see what you do with it." Grace spoke up next. "What about Miriam? She is only 8, and Caleb is still so young." "They will get their share when they are older," Hannah said. "And in the meantime, their portions will be held in trust. But all of you will receive something now if you want it." The children exchanged glances, and Hannah could see the emotions playing across their faces. Gratitude, certainly, but also concern, as though accepting the land meant acknowledging that their parents were getting older, mortal. Finally, Reuben spoke. "I would like to stay here and keep working the main homestead with you, if that is all right. I am not ready to go off on my own yet." Austin's face softened. "I was hoping you would say that, son. I could use your help. And I could use a piece of land to expand the ranch," Grace said, "if you are serious about this." "We are," Austin said, "completely serious." Over the next hour they discussed the details, drawing rough maps on paper, talking through boundaries and access roads. It was practical, businesslike, but underneath it all, Hannah could feel the weight of what they were doing. They were not just dividing land. They were passing on a legacy, ensuring that the work they had done would continue beyond them. When the meeting broke up, the children dispersed to various corners of the house and yard, and Hannah found herself in the kitchen with Henry's wife, Louise, a kind, intelligent woman who had given them 3 grandsons. "That must have been hard," Louise said as they washed dishes together. "Deciding to give up part of the land. It was necessary," Hannah said. "But yes, it was hard. This land is everything to us. We built it from nothing." "And now you are ensuring it will last," Louise said. "That is a beautiful thing, Hannah. Not every parent is so generous." Hannah dried a plate, thinking. "I just want them to be happy," she said. "I want them to have what Austin and I had the chance to build something of their own, to feel that sense of accomplishment." "They will," Louise said. "You and Austin have given them the tools they need. The rest is up to them." That evening, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Hannah and Austin sat alone in the parlor. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the room was warm and comfortable. Austin had a book open on his lap, but he was not reading. He was staring into the fire, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" Hannah asked. "About how strange it is," Austin said, "to be old. I do not feel old, not inside. But when I look in the mirror, I see an old man, and when I get up in the morning, my joints ache. Time is a strange thing." "Do you have regrets?" Hannah asked. Austin looked at her, surprised. "No," he said. "Not a single one. Do you?" "No," Hannah said. "I was just wondering." "My only regret," Austin said slowly, "is that I did not tell you I loved you more often in the early years. I felt it, but I was not good at saying it." "You showed it," Hannah said. "That was enough." "Was it?" Austin asked. "I hope so." Hannah moved from her chair to sit beside him on the sofa, curling into his side the way she had done 1,000 times before. "You dug a well with your bare hands," she said. "You worked yourself to exhaustion to provide for me and my family. You held me when I was sick and scared. You gave me 6 children and a life I never dreamed I could have. Yes, Austin, it was enough." He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "I am a lucky man," he said. "We are both lucky," Hannah said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, and Hannah thought about all the nights they had sat like this, all the storms they had weathered together. Their life had not been easy, but it had been good. So good. As winter settled in, the family continued to gather regularly. It became clear to Hannah that the children sensed something shifting, that they wanted to spend more time with their parents while they could. She appreciated it, even as it made her aware of the passage of time in a way she had not been before. One snowy afternoon in January, Hattie came to visit with news. She was engaged to be married, to a fellow teacher in Riverside, a kind man named Jonathan who had been courting her for over a year. "I wanted you to be the first to know," Hattie said, her eyes shining. "After Papa and Jonathan, of course. Jonathan asked Papa for permission last week." Hannah embraced her daughter, feeling joy and a bittersweet ache. Hattie was 33 now, and Hannah had begun to worry that she might never marry, might spend her life alone. But here she was, radiant with happiness, and Hannah said a silent prayer of gratitude. "When is the wedding?" she asked. "In the spring," Hattie said. "April, if that works for everyone. I want to get married here on the homestead if that is all right." "Of course it is all right," Hannah said. "This is your home. It will always be your home." The wedding planning gave Hannah a new focus, a project to pour her energy into. She worked with Hattie to make a dress, sewing late into the night by lamplight, her fingers remembering the motions even as her eyes strained. Austin built an arbor for the ceremony, working in the barn during the cold days, sanding and painting until it was perfect. The wedding was beautiful. April brought warm sun and wildflowers, and the prairie was green and alive. Hattie married her Jonathan under the arbor Austin had built, with all her siblings and their families in attendance. Hannah stood beside Austin and watched their daughter say her vows, and she felt her heart swell with love and pride. At the reception, held in the yard with tables set up under the trees, Austin asked Hattie to dance. Hannah watched them move together, her serious, thoughtful daughter and her quiet, steady father, and she saw Austin lean down and whisper something in Hattie's ear. Hattie's face crumpled, and she hugged her father tightly, and Austin held her, swaying gently to the music. Later, Hannah asked Austin what he had said. "I told her she was beautiful," Austin said, "and that I was proud of her, and that I hoped she would be as happy in her marriage as I have been in mine." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. That was a good thing to say. "It was the truth," Austin said simply. That summer, they received word that Isaac and his wife were expecting their 4th child. Reuben started courting a girl from town, a farmer's daughter named Clara with a bright smile and capable hands. Caleb decided to stay home and work the land instead of going to university, much to Austin's relief. And Miriam, now 10, was growing into a lovely, thoughtful child who loved to read and help her mother in the garden. Life continued, full and rich. But Hannah noticed that Austin was slowing down. He still worked every day, but he tired more easily, and sometimes she caught him rubbing his chest as though it ached. When she asked him about it, he brushed it off, said it was nothing, just age catching up with him, but Hannah worried. In August, Austin collapsed in the barn. Reuben found him and carried him into the house, and Hannah sent Caleb racing to town for the doctor. Austin was conscious but pale, sweating, and he clutched at Hannah's hand as she sat beside him. "I am all right," he kept saying. "I just need to rest." The doctor, a younger man named Mitchell who had taken over old Dr. Pritchard's practice, examined Austin thoroughly. When he was done, he pulled Hannah aside. "His heart is weak," Dr. Mitchell said. "It is not uncommon in men his age, especially men who have worked as hard as your husband has. He needs to rest, Mrs. Pierce. No more heavy labor, and he needs to be careful." "How careful?" Hannah asked, her voice tight. "Very careful," the doctor said. "I cannot say how long he has, but if he keeps pushing himself, it will not be long." Hannah felt the world tilt beneath her. She had known, on some level, that they were mortal, that their time was limited. But knowing it intellectually and facing it as an immediate reality were two different things. She went back into the bedroom where Austin lay. He looked small in the bed, vulnerable in a way she had never seen him. His eyes were closed, but when she sat beside him and took his hand, they opened. "What did the doctor say?" he asked. "He said you need to rest," Hannah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "No more heavy work. You have to take it easy, Austin." Austin's jaw tightened. "I am fine." "You are not fine," Hannah said, and her voice broke. "Your heart is weak, Austin. You collapsed. You could have died out there in the barn, and I would not have known until it was too late." Austin's expression softened. He reached up and touched her face, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "I am sorry," he said. "I did not mean to scare you." "Then promise me you will rest," Hannah said. "Promise me you will let Reuben and Caleb handle the heavy work. Please, Austin." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the struggle in his eyes. Austin was a man who had worked all his life, who defined himself by what he could do, what he could build. The idea of being idle, of being weak, was anathema to him, but finally he nodded. "I promise," he said. "For you, I promise." Over the next few months, Austin kept his promise as best he could. He still went out to oversee the work, to offer advice and direction, but he let Reuben and Caleb do the physical labor. He sat on the porch more, whittling or reading, and Hannah often joined him, bringing her mending or her knitting. They talked more during those months, long conversations about their life, their children, their memories. Austin told her stories she had never heard before, about his childhood in Texas, about the cattle drives, about the years before he met her. And Hannah told him about her own childhood, about her dreams as a girl, about the moment at the dance when she had decided to kiss him. "I almost did not do it," she admitted one afternoon. "I almost chickened out at the last second." "I am glad you did not," Austin said. "That kiss changed my life." "It changed mine too," Hannah said. They sat in silence for a while, and then Austin said, "I am not afraid of dying, Hannah. I have had a good life, better than I ever thought I would have, but I am afraid of leaving you." Hannah's throat tightened. "I do not want to think about it." "We have to," Austin said gently. "I need to know you will be all right." "I will never be all right without you," Hannah said, and the words came out fierce, almost angry. "Do not ask me to be." "You will be," Austin said. "You are strong, Hannah, stronger than you know, and you will have the children and the grandchildren. They will take care of you." "I do not want them to take care of me," Hannah said. "I want you." Austin pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the familiar smell of him, soap and leather and hay. "I know," he said. "I want me too." It was such an absurd thing to say that Hannah laughed despite herself, a choked, watery sound. Austin smiled against her hair. "We will have as much time as we can," he said, "and we will make it count." And they did. They made every day count. Austin took to writing letters to each of the children, long letters full of advice and love and memories. He wrote one to each grandchild too, to be opened when they were older. Hannah helped him. addressing the envelopes, making sure he did not tire himself out. They celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a dinner Hannah cooked and a bottle of wine they had been saving. They toasted to the years behind them and the years, however many, still to come. "I would do it all again," Austin said, raising his glass. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy, all of it." "So would I," Hannah said, and they drank together, their eyes locked, saying everything that words could not convey. As autumn arrived again, bringing with it the sharp, clear air and the turning leaves, Austin seemed to rally. His color improved and he had more energy. Hannah allowed herself to hope that maybe the doctor had been wrong, that maybe Austin would recover, that they would have years yet. But then, on a cold morning in October, Austin did not wake up. Hannah woke beside him as she always did, turning to curl into his warmth, and found him still and cold. For a moment she could not process it, could not understand, and then the truth crashed over her like a wave, and she screamed. Reuben came running, and the rest of the household woke in chaos. The doctor was sent for, but there was nothing to be done. Austin had died in his sleep, peacefully, his heart finally giving out. Hannah sat beside his body, holding his hand, and she could not cry. The grief was too big, too overwhelming. It filled her completely, leaving no room for anything else. The funeral was held 3 days later. All the children came, and their families, and half the county besides. Austin had been respected, liked, a man who kept his word and helped his neighbors. People came from miles around to pay their respects. They buried him on a hill overlooking the homestead, under a cottonwood tree, with a simple stone marker. Hannah stood at the graveside, flanked by her children, and listened to the minister talk about Austin's life, his work, his love for his family. But the words felt distant, unreal. It was not until later, when everyone had gone and Hannah was alone in the house, that the grief finally broke through. She sat in the parlor where she and Austin had spent so many evenings together, and she wept. She wept for the loss of him, for the empty space he had left, for all the tomorrows they would not have. The days that followed were the hardest of Hannah's life. She moved through them in a fog, going through the motions of living but feeling hollowed out, empty. Her children worried about her, took turns staying with her, but Hannah could not shake the weight of her grief. One evening, about 2 weeks after the funeral, Hattie found her mother sitting on the porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. "Mama," Hattie said gently, "you need to eat something. You are wasting away." "I am not hungry," Hannah said. Hattie sat beside her, taking her hand. "Papa would not want you to give up." "I am not giving up," Hannah said. "I am just tired, Hattie, so tired." "I know," Hattie said, "but you are still here, Mama. You still have us. We need you." Hannah looked at her daughter, at the concern and love in her face, and she felt something shift inside her. She was not the only one grieving. Her children had lost their father, her grandchildren their grandfather. And they were looking to her for strength, for guidance. "You are right," Hannah said finally. "I am sorry I have been selfish." "You have not been selfish," Hattie said. "You loved Papa, we all did, but he would want you to live, Mama, to really live, not just exist." Hannah nodded slowly. "I will try," she said. And she did try. It was hard at first, forcing herself to get up every morning, to eat, to engage with the world. But slowly, day by day, the fog began to lift. The grief was still there, a constant ache in her chest, but it became something she could live with, something that did not consume her entirely. She found comfort in the routines Austin had loved. She walked the land every morning, checking on the cattle and the crops, seeing the work that Reuben and Caleb were doing to keep the homestead running. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, making sure they remembered him. and she read Austin's letters, the ones he had written to her over the years, and the final one he had written just before he died, sealed in an envelope with her name on it. She waited until she felt strong enough, and then one quiet evening she opened it. "My dearest Hannah," it began in Austin's careful, slightly crooked handwriting. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am sorry for that. I am sorry for leaving you, even though I know it was not my choice. I hope I went peacefully in my sleep, so that you were not burdened with seeing me suffer. I want you to know that my life with you was everything I ever wanted and more than I ever deserved. You took a chance on a nobody cowboy, and you gave me a home, a family, a purpose. Every good thing in my life I owe to you. I know you are grieving, and I know it hurts, but I also know you are strong. You are the strongest person I have ever known, Hannah. And I need you to keep living, to keep loving, to keep being the heart of this family. Our children and grandchildren need you. Remember the happy times. Remember the kiss at the dance, the morning I came to ask for your hand, the day we moved into our house, the births of our children. Remember all the evenings on the porch, all the quiet moments, all the laughter. That is what I want you to hold on to. I love you, Hannah Brennan Pierce. I have loved you every day of our life together, and I will love you beyond the grave. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Until we meet again, your Austin." Hannah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. And when she was done, she folded it carefully and held it against her chest, feeling the love in every word. "Until we meet again," she whispered. "I love you, Austin." The years that followed were bittersweet. Hannah continued to live on the homestead, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She watched Reuben marry Clara and start a family of their own. She danced at Caleb's wedding and held Miriam's first baby. She saw Henry become a grandfather himself, and she marveled at how quickly time passed. She never remarried. The thought never even crossed her mind. Austin had been her great love, her one love, and she was content to honor his memory for the rest of her days. But she did not just exist in the past. She lived fully, embracing each day as a gift. She traveled to Chicago to visit Henry, took the train for the first time and marveled at the speed and noise of the city. She learned to use a telephone when Isaac had one installed at his veterinary practice. She saw the world changing around her and adapted to it, always curious, always interested. And every evening, if she was at the homestead, she went to the hill where Austin was buried. She sat under the cottonwood tree and talked to him, telling him about her day, about the children, about the world. She told him she loved him, and she felt, in the quiet of those moments, that he was there with her still. Hannah lived to be 86 years old, dying peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1943. Surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Austin had created. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember her, to celebrate her life, to honor the legacy she had left. And when they buried her beside Austin on the hill, under the cottonwood tree, the family knew that the story that had begun with a kiss at a county dance had come full circle. Hannah and Austin were together again, and the love they had shared lived on in every person who carried their name, in every acre of land they had claimed, in every story told around the dinner table. Their great-grandson, a boy of 10 named Henry after his great-great-grandfather, stood at the graveside and asked his mother, were they really in love? And his mother smiled through her tears and said, "More than you can imagine, sweetheart. They loved each other more than anything in the world." "How do you know?" the boy asked. "Because of all of this," his mother said, gesturing to the family gathered around them, to the homestead stretching out below them, to the life that Hannah and Austin had built. "Because of us. We are the proof of their love." And it was true. Decades after that impulsive kiss at a county dance. Decades after a cowboy rode home through the night to ask for a woman's hand. The love of Hannah Brennan and Austin Pierce lived on, as real and present as the Kansas prairie, as enduring as the stars overhead. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their love eternal. And that was the happiest ending of all.